My boyfriend and I have been together for 2 years. He's a good heart and is normally rational, but his one issue is that he expects to accompany me in every occasion no matter how big or small. He even went with me to my ex-boyfriend's funeral after days of begging. Now my best friend got married few days ago. It was very small and only close family and friends were invited. My boyfriend couldn't come because of the +1 rule. He pitched a hissy fit saying my best friend has no respect for my relationship and was shocked when he learned that I was still going to attend. He told me that if he can't go then I'm expected to not go as well, but that is my best friend and I had to respect her rules. He gave me an ultimatum: either we go together or I stay home with him. I ended up going cause again I respected my friend's rules. He was angry with me and kept calling the entire 2-hour drive, then stopped. Later I got a text from his friend telling me my boyfriend, got into an accident and was taken to the hospital. I freaked out. He gave me the address and I had to leave the wedding and told my friends why. I was crying the entire drive home and kept calling his friend but got no response. I arrived to the hospital and asked about my boyfriend and they checked and told me he wasn't there. My anxiety reached 160% as I kept calling his friends one by one. I just went home and there he was, along with his friend. He saw me and said that he was sorry, but this was the only he can get me home after I left him alone. After the initial shock, I just blew up yelling at him about lying and making me leave my friend's wedding, and having me literally go to the hospital and freaking out cause of him. I kicked his friend out and we got into an argument. He kept talking about how much I love him, thus I left, which is my own doing, not his, and he was just trying to see if I really chose my friend's wedding over him. He then argued that my friend caused this and I shouldn't agree with her to exclude him. I said what he did was horrible and called him horrible and then went to my room. It was awful cause my friends kept calling to check in on him cause they thought he was really at the hospital. He said I overreacted and that I yelled at the wrong person. He has a history of mental health issues but got better the past few months. He also had a recent death in his family which really affected his health generally. I have been with my partner for 7 years. We initially met online, and after meeting in person a few times and realizing our affection for one another, we found it promising to move in together. I moved from California to Pennsylvania to be with him throughout graduate school. All was seemingly well during this time. I have never really had any reason to not trust him. I encouraged him to, very much so, to try his best to make friends, or to explore hobbies on his own outside of the various ones we share, because I have my own passions. And I found we connected most when we met in the middle through conversations about these passions, through the act of explaining or showcasing what we've taken in or learned. Throughout these 7 years, he has struggled with very low self-esteem, and though I don't necessarily think of myself as the pillar of self-love, the depth of mine doesn't reach the low perception of his self-value. Because of this, he has seen and stopped seeing both a counselor and a therapist, and has been on medication to help for the last 6 months. Things were seemingly well between us, and continued to be pretty fluid. We continued to share things, and take long walks, and were pretty open-ended about where we stood in the relationship. If one was feeling a bit of an ebb, the other would pick up more of a share, and vice versa. However, things took a bit of a dip about 2 days ago when I felt the ebb, and asked him about it. Initially, he said there was really nothing wrong. And perhaps I was just feeling this way because with our schedules we haven't been able to see one another for long periods of time like we are used to, which is true. But the feeling continued to irk me, and when I asked about it a second time, he confessed to me he had begun talking to another girl from another country via Instagram direct messages. And though things between she and him never crossed the boundaries of platonic friendship, he really loved the initial rush of someone asking him questions about his favorite movie, his favorite album, his favorite book. All things he and I already know very well about one another. I asked if he'd sent any selfies, or anything risque, and he said no, though I can't confirm, because he deleted the messages. A good deal of me believes him, because of how open he was about the initial conversations to begin with. We slept apart, and I just felt really confused the entire night, because I couldn't really resonate with wanting that sort of attention from someone else. If anything, his yearning for that type of attention sort of hurt. It felt like I wasn't doing enough, or giving enough. The next morning, though I don't have an Instagram, and am not on the app, I went to check his using the desktop version and found that posts where he once called me the love of his life, or a specific post with a gift I gave him that once said, "Greatest gift from the greatest girl," were still on his profile, but the words, "girlfriend," or "love of my life," were completed erased. With this realization, my confusion and hurt turned to very real heartache. I called him and asked if he had deleted these words from the specific posts, and with shame, he said yes, he did. When I asked why, he said it was because he just didn't want the attention from the girl asking him about himself to be disrupted if she found out he was in a long-term relationship. I guess this is where I asked the obvious and questioned why someone who is just asking about your favorite books, movies, etc., would be driven away by the fact that you have a girlfriend. And he said he didn't know why he did it, and that it was a massive mistake. At the risk of seeming toxic, and I will take full accountability for seeming so or being so, I asked him to please deactivate his Instagram for the time being while we sort through this, his Twitter as well. He did, and though I was feeling a bit of relief about that, I couldn't help but feel a bit saddened that he didn't choose to do that on his own for the benefit of our relationship. He had to wait for me to ask. Which again, just made me feel like such a toxic and controlling partner. Two things I always strive to be so far from. When he got home from work, we discussed everything at massive length, and he continued to swear up and down that these conversations pertained strictly to music, movies, and books, and he didn't have interest in her. Just interest in the initial rush of the attention he was receiving. We read a few articles, and he broke things down to me as his self-esteem has never been lower. Despite his career as a doctor being at a high, and his finances in order, he felt things with his music weren't taking off. And with that came a feeling that he wasn't special, and it was nice for someone to make him feel that way. I felt shame and asked him if I wasn't doing enough or giving enough to him to make him feel that way. He said, I defiantly was. But my love, and attention and affection, became a pillar he could rely on, and got used to, so with new attention came a rush. And he liked that. I asked him if he wanted to be single, and find that rush in dating new people. And he kept insisting that that's so far from what he wants. He wants to remain a couple, and do all he can to work on these things together. Though I can't help but correlate that feeling he enjoys with the feeling of a first date. Which hurts, of course. I told him I didn't really see how we could move past this because there was nothing much for me to make an attempt to work on moving forward. This seems to be a self-stemming problem that I emphasize with, but just don't want to be on the receiving end of the counter effects. So though it is incredibly uneasy to begin to think of how difficult it'll be to begin again, it is just as difficult to think about how difficult it would be to stay and try to rebuild back up an issue that I feel like just a bystander. When it comes to this has all been very painful, and if this comes to an end, I just want it to be as civil and as possible. He deserves to love himself, but not at the expense of the love we have between us. I deserve love that is stable and comforting, and not laced with newfound paranoia. Despite this all, my heart is still very much in this, of course, and he has been very vocal about how it was just one mistake. Nothing happened, we can work through this, etc. And I secretly keep hoping he will make a step, any step really, to showcase these words and implement action, seek a new therapist. Find the two of us a relationship counselor, buy a book on self-help or on how couple conquer affairs, anything at all. Without me having to be the one to ask him. I just want him to have that yearning that he continues to say he has, but instead of saying it, I was him to show me. That makes me irrational or just plain dumb. I believe to be in a state where I can handle either answer. Or something completely different just the same. Do all think I'm blowing something completely out of proportion? Given how this was an exchange of conversation between him and another girl for just a few days. And his erasure of me on his profile was only for about 2 days? This has been a first in this relationship, this has been a first in my life truthfully. I just felt completely vulnerable and isolated. My wife and I have been together for 3 years. I have a daughter from my previous marriage. She's 14. I also have a stepson who tends to be rude at times but civil enough around adults. He's 16. He and his stepsister get along well. No arguing. No yelling, even better than most siblings I know, which is great, and it's quite a relief to see them loving and respecting each other. We have 2 bathrooms in the house. My daughter only uses the smaller one, since it's always available, unlike the main bathroom that me, my stepson and wife often use. I've recently received some money and decided to renovate the small bathroom that my daughter uses, since she complained about things needing to be fixed. I started the renovation 2 days ago, while my daughter uses the main bathroom as an alternative. There were no issues until my wife pulled me aside saying my daughter's been leaving period products inside the bathroom, and it wasn't right 'cause my stepson would see them. I asked my wife for more clarification, and turns out my daughter gets rid of her used pads by putting them in the trash can inside the bathroom. I told my wife there was nothing wrong with that, so what's the problem? She gave me a look, called me an ignorant, then dropped it. This morning she looked upset and told me my stepson went inside the bathroom after my daughter got out, and probably saw her used pads in the bathroom. I asked if she meant the trash can, and it was confirmed. She then proceeded to tell me to ask my daughter to stop using the main bathroom even though the small one is still in the process of being renovated. I absolutely lost my shit and told her she was making a ridiculously unreasonable demand. Told her it's my daughter's house too. Where is she supposed to go if she can't use both bathrooms? We started arguing back and forth until she said she'd talk to her, but I told her to stop it. She just kept giving me the cold shoulder for hours now, even though my stepson said nothing about this issue as she claims it to be. My wife said she was trying to be a parent, but I treat her as an outsider to my daughter. That's not true. I might have been harsh on her, but in my opinion she wasn't trying to parent, she was being unreasonable. I might be wrong, I just don't see her point. My wife is an incredibly private person, but that doesn't mean she can get others to follow. The trash can we have has a lid. It's a step-on trash can that doesn't require hands. My stepson isn't even aware of what his mom's talking about. He can barely look around, he always has his phone glued to his face, and he doesn't pay attention to anything. Me and Diamara, she is 12 years old, have had a rough summer. She's been more defiant than usual. I've been dating her mom Mara for 2 years now. 9 months ago, they moved in with me, Maple. Both Dio and Mara have an on-again / off-again relationship with Dio's dad, Dionysus. He's pretty much never paid child support, comes and goes as he pleases into Dio's life. Typical shitty-ass part-time dad. I've tried to fill the dad role in her life, while still understanding boundaries, taking things slow, etc. This summer Dionysus decides he wants to be a real dad and takes Dio in for a month. Good for him, not my business, and Mara agrees. When Dio came back home because school started, she was a lot different. Really mean to me, very dismissive. A few days ago she got caught shoplifting at the mall. Security took her in, then called Mara, who didn't answer, then called Dionysus, who didn't answer, and finally me. I answered. They told me I had to pick her up or she'll be handed over to juvenile. I didn't say anything to her while I picked her up. I apologized to security, apologized to the store. I even tipped the security guards plus the store employees because it's up, they had to deal with that. I assured them Dio would be punished appropriately. I'm speaking to her in a strong, affirmative voice while we're in the car. Not yelling, but in a fatherly tone, I suppose. I'm telling her how up it is to steal, and how I don't. With thieves, and how I absolutely don't voluntarily. With any kind of police, so I don't appreciate any of this, nor will I accept it in my house. She snaps back that I'm not her dad, so don't ever tell her what to do. From now on, if I want to tell her something, I need to clear it with her real father first. That killed my soul. For the past year or so, I've treated her as my own daughter. I've paid for their housing, I've paid for her mom's car, her schooling, her food, everything. Her bio dad dropped $100 check off one time in the past year. In check bounced, so I had to call him up and he brought cash over. I told Mara about all of this. She was appalled at what Dio said, but she never made Dio apologize because she's not wrong, you're not her dad. A couple of days later, Dio asks me for some money to pay for her uniform / accessories she needs for a sport she's involved in. I say, go ask your dad. She scoffs and says her dad doesn't have the money for it, so I have to pay for it. I tell her, I'm not her dad, so don't ever tell me what I have to pay for. She cried to Mara, who tells me I'm not being an adult about the situation. Mind you, I never received an apology or a thanks for our entire previous situation. Mara says Dio is a kid and I need to stop acting like a kid too.